And we will give folks a few seconds to trickle into the room before I start introductions.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to the QEM Heroes webinar series. My name is Christine Wood, and I serve as the Assistant Program Director for the Heroes Fellows Program at QEM. For more than 30 years, QEM has been a national catalyst for STEM education transformation and research capacity building. Currently, the QEM network serves nearly 900 colleges and universities and reaches more than 8,000 individuals nationwide. This webinar is part of the HEROES initiative. The HEROES program brings together researchers with experience in the federal government to lend their expertise and support to the STEM research and education communities. Our fellows are here to provide tools and tips for navigating the funding landscape, developing STEM programs and partnerships, and improving talent retention in in-demand fields. We hope this series promotes engagement with our HEROES fellows and provides valuable resources to our participants. During the webinar, we invite you to use the Q&A tool to ask questions. We will address those questions at the end of the presentation. The webinar recordings and slides will be available in the QEM Resource Hub. By attending this webinar, you will be added to the QEM network and granted access to the Resource Hub. And I'm happy to introduce our presenters today. Dr. Janae Linkins is a mechanical engineer, researcher, and founder of the nonprofit Don't Adjust Your Crown, where she advances equity in STEM through mentorship, design, and community engagement. She recently earned her PhD in mechanical engineering from the University of Maryland, where her research focused on equity-centered and Black-centered design and emerging technologies. Dr. Linkins works at the intersection of engineering, social impact, and inclusive research, helping institutions reimagine how STEM can better serve historically marginalized communities. And Dr. Amaka Wankwo is a global health executive and epidemiologist with more than 25 years of leadership advancing HIV/AIDS programs, health system strengthening, and equity-centered policy across Africa, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, and the United States. She most recently served as Senior HIV Technical Advisor and Acting Office Director for USAID in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Dr. Wankwo brings expertise in TA science and epidemiology, strategic information, and cross-sector partnerships, complemented by experiences as a teacher lecturer and mental health coach trainer. She holds a Doctor of Public Health and Global Health Epidemiology from Morgan State University and degrees in Education and Chemistry from Temple University. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to our presenters today. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Christine, for that introduction. Let me share my screen. All right. All right. How do we look? Let me see the slides. Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Christine. My name is Dr. Janae Linkins, and today we will be talking about advancing social impact in NSF-funded STEM research, specifically talking about equity-centered design, broader impacts, and institutional strategies. So by the end of this webinar, our goal is to make sure that our participants will leave with practical strategies that you can implement at your institutions. We'll talk about how the reviewers actually interpret broader impacts because many proposals fail simply due to misunderstanding the expectations. We will also discuss how equity-centered design can strengthen research impact. And finally, we will look into the administrative side of how the research offices and administrators can build systems that help faculty develop stronger, broader impact plans. So with that, let's get started. So we want to start by understanding where we're at in the room. So different institutions approach broader impacts in very different ways. So some have dedicated offices or staff focused on the work, while others provide guidance only when asked for it. So your response will be helpful for how we're going to tell the rest of this conversation. So the question for the poll will come up is how does your institution currently support broader impacts?
And I will launch the poll. And I'll give participants a few more seconds to answer. If you're here, please respond to the poll.
Awesome. Okay, so what we have, we got most of our people saying minimum structured report and then ad hoc. Okay, great. Okay, so there's some variation across institutions, is, somewhat significant. So some of them, treat broader impacts as like a compliance checkbox, while others have a, entire built infrastructure around it. So neither of these are inherently wrong, but it also shapes what support faculty actually need. So thinking about how faculty at institutions with less support often reinvent the wheel with each proposal. So this conversation will aim to help address some of that gap. Understanding where everyone is starting from will help ensure our discussion. So thank you for that, everyone participating. All right, so one of the most important things to remember is that NSF proposals, which is the National Science Foundation, are evaluated on two criteria. So, intellectual merit, which focuses on the quality and advancement of the science, and then secondly is broader impacts, which evaluates how the research benefits society. So these two criteria carry equal weight in the review process, yet many proposals still treat that broader impacts as an afterthought. So that afterthought problem is very pervasive when broader impact sections are often written like the night before the submission or recycled from previous proposals, or like I said before, treating it as a box checking exercise rather than a genuine planning component. So NSF has been increasingly explicit in that reviewer guidance that the weak broader impacts can sink an otherwise like strong proposal. So that's not no longer a soft criteria. So many faculty don't realize that broader impacts can include things like training the next generation of scientists, broadening participation, or even building public scientific literacy. It's broader than those different outreach events. So as broader impact has a strong broader impacts plan is most effective when it is integrated into the research design from the start and not added at the end. So just something to remember. So when NSF talks about broader impacts, they're referring to ways research can contribute beyond the lab. So this can include broadening participation in STEM, workforce development, community engagement, and societal benefit. The key point is that broader impact should connect meaningfully to the research and not exist as a disconnected outreach activity. That disconnected outreach is like a trap, is one of the most common mistakes a PI or primary investigator who studies material science shouldn't feel obligated to run like a K through 12 science fair because it really has no real connection to their work. So just making sure that you have that authentic connection that matters. So NSF does recognize five broad categories of broader impacts. So that would be advancing discovery while promoting teaching and training, broadening participation of underrepresented groups, enhancing research infrastructure, broad dissemination of results, and societal benefits. So faculty often undersell what they're already doing. So like mentoring graduate students, publishing open access, or collaborating with industry all count and should be explicitly framed as broader impacts and in that broader impact section. So just making sure that you're highlighting what you're doing at your university. Um, so another important question we have here is that so many research administrators tell us that they are often brought into the broader impacts conversation very late in the process. So the strongest proposals integrate impact design very early. So our next question is, when do faculty typically engage you on broader impacts?
I have launched the poll. Please respond.
Awesome. Okay, so we have about equal between concept stage during drafting and after receiving news, and about one person final week before submission. Okay, so again, we have some more variation, but so let's talk about what some of these things mean. So late in the process often means that there's like the week before submission. So at that point, there's little room for anything beyond like formulaic paragraph. Real impact planning requires months and not days. Early involvement will allow the administrators to help faculty identify community partners, align activities with existing institutional programs, and build budgets that actually support the work. So there's a cultural shift needed here. Broader impact shouldn't be seen as an administrative task handed off at the end, but as a core part of the research design that benefits from collaboration from day one. So some institutions have addressed this by embedding broader impact check-ins into early grant development workshops or pre-award consultations. So it might be good to, tap in with your university faculty to figure out what resources that they have for you. Next, let's talk about equity-centered design research. So this is not just a diversity statement. It means designing research programs that intentionally include and benefit communities that are often excluded from STEM. And so that can involve inclusive recruitment strategies, authentic community partnerships, budgeting for accessibility and participant compensation, and also defining measurable outcomes. I would say a common mistake is treating equity as an add-on, listing demographic targets without explaining how the research design actually removes barriers to participation. And so reviewers do notice this. Authentic community partnerships take time to build and should ideally precede the proposal, not to be promised within it. So faculty who have already have relationships within like community organizations are at like a significant advantage. Budgeting for equity is often overlooked, so things like, childcare, transportation, language access, and participant compensation are legitimate grant expenses and signal to the reviewers that the plan is realistic and respectful. And measurable outcomes are key. Vague commitments are like we will broaden participation are far weaker than like specific targets with a clear plan for tracking and reporting progress. So these are some of the most common issues reviewers identify. So often the broader impacts section needs like or reads like a list of good intentions rather than a structured plan. If the activities are not connected to the research, not funded or not evaluated, reviewers often view them as unrealistic. There like the list of good intention problems often stems from faculty writing the broader impact section in isolation without thinking through the logistics, partnerships, or evaluation. So a structured template or even a checklist can help break this habit. Funding is also a telling signal. If the budget has no line items supporting the broader impact activities, reviewers will question whether the PI is genuinely committed to carrying them out. Evaluation is frequently the most underdeveloped component. Faculty often don't know how to build upon like an evaluation plan. And this is the place where research administrators can add significant value by connecting faculty to assessment resources. And lastly, disconnection from the research is especially problematic. Activities that could have been proposed by the researcher in any field signal the broader impacts were not thoughtfully designed for this specific project. So just making sure that, we are staying away from some of these common things that will get our proposals not funded, not accepted. So, what distinguishes strong proposals is integration. So the impact activities reinforce the research goals rather than existing separately. Successful proposals also demonstrate feasibility, clear evaluation strategies, and sustainability beyond the life of the grant. Integration is like the hallmark of a mature, broader impacts plan. So when the PI can explain how the outreach or training activities generate data, how it builds capacity, or even extends the researchers' reach or the research reach, reviewers recognize that the plan was designed alongside the science and not after it. Feasibility is often undersold. It's worth explicitly noting existing infrastructure, partnerships, or track record that makes the plan believable. Reviewers are skeptical of ambitious plans with no evidence that they can be executed. And lastly, evaluation doesn't have to be complicated. Even a simple logic model with clear inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes goes a long way towards demonstrating that the PI has thought through whether the work is actually working. And sustainability is increasingly important to NSF. They want to know the impact They want to know that the impact won't evaporate the day that the grant ends. So even a brief statement about how these activities will be institutionalized or handed off shows that forward thinking. And so in addition to integrating equity-centered design, um, sorry, I'm gonna hand it over to Dr. Wankwa. I got excited. Sorry.
Very good. Thank you so much, Dr. Lincoln. We like that excitement. I know that you could do the rest of the presentation, certainly, but I'll share a few things with you in addition to what was just shared by Dr. Lincoln. So thank you. So we want to be sure that we give a proper credence to all of what we've just mentioned. So in addition to what Dr. Lincoln just shared regarding equity-centered design, another goal for today's webinar is to enhance the social impact through the NSF Broader Impacts design and consider these strategies. And these are just considerations. There are no specific order, though they're numbered here. But ensuring that we're identifying the community and the community needs through things like surveys and stakeholder engagement is essential. Oftentimes, we sort of think of community as being ingraded, and a community needs assessment can be skipped entirely. But faculty tend to assume that they know what the community needs because you've been working with them for so long. But we need to see that well documented within the broader impacts framework. So even a brief listing of listening sessions that were conducted or surveys with the stakeholders can dramatically strengthen the credibility of the proposal. In addition, integrating diverse perspectives is equally important, ensuring that these are inclusive to the project development. So diverse perspectives aren't just about who's on the research team, right? It's about whose voice is shaped and through the research questions, through the design, the dissemination plan, et cetera. These are where community engaged research approaches can be particularly powerful. In addition, we also want to be sure that we're collaborating with local organizations to leverage resources and expertise. What does that mean? Local organization partnerships, I think, exist through many of the institutions that are represented here today, but they're the most convincing when they come with written letters of support that go beyond the boilerplates that are typically included. So a specific detailed commitment from a partner or organization signals a real relationship, number one, but then also it says that this is beyond just the needs of this particular proposal or application. It's not a last minute ask, for example. Also, developing measurable outcomes. I don't think I need to really say this because I think people really focus on this part during the proposal phase, but those outcomes assess the project's social impact as well. And that's maybe not always the connection that's made when we're looking at measurable objectives and other targets, et cetera. Also ensuring that the targets, if you will, and these outcomes are actually something that Dr. Lincoln talked about are also connected at the end towards the evaluation phase of the proposal as well. Also creating educational components to disseminate knowledge and skills and ensuring sustainability for community involvement. Long-term community involvement is what I should have written there as well. So these educational components should connect to the existing infrastructure when possible, but also partnering with local school districts, community colleges, even museums that already have this capacity. And some of the work that you're trying to do is far more feasible than building a program from scratch. Next slide. Let's talk about how we get some application in all of this. So we're going to go over a case study that we hope will resonate in some ways, or at least give you some of what we've discussed in some of the theory, but how to really apply it. Next slide. So this is a hypothetical project that focuses on AI-driven water quality monitoring using machine learning models. So I think these are all top of mind, very innovative technical aspects that we're all sort of looking at in some capacity. From a research angle, this particular case study focuses on machine learning models for predicting contaminant spread in the water, Flint. I'll just leave it out there. The field is the environmental engineering as well as computer science could be incorporated. And you can see here the NSF directorates that are also noted. Next slide. So from an equity-centered design aspect that we've gone through, this would explain how community co-design strengthens both the rigor and the broader impacts. This is the focus here. We want the partnership here would be with the rural or tribal community. They're co-developing monitoring priorities, paid student internships with MSIs, as well as accessible public dashboards. This project has a partnership component that's necessary not only for broader impacts, but also for the outcome. Next slide. So we have a poll, again, ready for you because we want to understand. We don't just want to talk at you and provide maybe some of what you already know, but let's get a better understanding of what the biggest challenges are from your own perspectives in supporting broader impacts. So many research administrators tell us different things when they come to the broader impact conversation. We want to know what you're thinking. So please launch the poll.
Here we go.
Hope that everyone has responded. Let's see if we get the results. Great. So I'm seeing the results here is, again, a good even spread, but we see that many of you have really suggested that your biggest challenge is faculty engagement, as well as evaluation design and something else. So maybe if you can drop in the chat what the something else, because there's about a third of you that are having other challenges that weren't listed here. Budget constraints are limited, as well as the partnerships. But again, those are the ones that were mentioned. So that's really important to note. So it sounds like the collaborative aspect and bringing together faculty, as well as looking at the design phase that Dr. Lincoln's mentioned a little earlier, and maybe some other responses that we'll get as we go through this last end of the presentation. Next slide. So the administrative implementation roadmap, the position for the research administrators here, we're still in the case study aspect, is to build an ecosystem of, again, some of what was just mentioned as a challenge in terms of engagement from faculty and other staff, is to build that ecosystem within your institution. Institutions can standardize the planning templates. I think maybe that's already being done, but also developing vetted partnership databases. I'm not sure how many of you do that. These are the things that consistently win NSF funding and often build the infrastructure around broader impacts. Also engaging evaluators at the concept stage, not at the end stage. And I don't know if that's something that's also a challenge for some. And then offering reoccurring BI focused faculty development. That includes everything from training opportunities to developing faculty design impact early, keyword being early. Next slide. So to build that capacity, again, we're still within the case study framework for broader impacts. They suggest that they'll centralize broader impact advisory models, also internal seed funding potentially for partnerships, and structured BI review committees. These are for post-award impact tracking systems, as well as capacity building increases for long-term competitiveness. These things also improve the ability not only to win the funding, but also to have that long-term community partnership engagement over time. Seeing the outcomes unfold and sharing and disseminating that all along the way also improves the partnerships moving forward long-term. Next slide. So broader impacts carry some equal weight with the intellectual merit, as were mentioned. Some key takeaways that we want you to hear as far as research leaders, that they carry the equal weight. Also, the equity-centered design strengthens the competitiveness, all right? It remains one of the most misunderstood portions of the proposal process. So too often, it becomes an afterthought that was mentioned or just a checklist that was also mentioned. So today, we want to go beyond that, and we hope that you've received some tidbits of information and things that you can do and go back to your institutions for improvement. Early engagement, as we mentioned earlier, also improves the quality, and the impact must be measurable, funded, and sustainable. What does that mean? Because when it's done well, broader impacts really become something more powerful. That's actually the goal. It's a strategic framework for advancing the equity, the innovation, and also the real societal community benefit throughout the research. Back over to you, Dr. Lincolns.
Thank you so much. So in closing, we just want to hone in on one key idea is that impact is not something that gets added at the end of the proposal. It's something that must be intentionally designed and supported by institutional infrastructure. And so just making sure your research administrators are central to the NSF competitiveness. We want to focus on research excellence, equity, centered design, and institutional infrastructure. And so with that, we just want to thank you for joining us in our webinar today. You can scan our QR codes for the Heroes webpage, events page that has our upcoming webinars and also our feedback form. And if you'd like to get in contact with us, our emails are listed on the slide. And with that, we'll take some questions.
Yeah, you can either use the Q&A box to ask your questions, or if you'd like, you can raise your hand to come off mute, ask a question live. I'm going to address Greg Davis's comment in the chat. It seems to me the biggest problem is that most researchers want to use their funding for as much research as possible. Now, to clarify, that might be about wanting to focus on the intellectual merit more than the broader impacts to justify the methodologies and the science, and broader impacts might become an afterthought because of the undue focus on the intellectual merit.
Certainly, Greg, I think you're probably spot on with a lot of institutions or the way people go about thinking about broader impacts. That's why we kept saying, remember that they carry equal weight. And that's not often seen. And then people wonder, wow, I had a really strong proposal, certainly maybe on the institutional merit side, but not as much on the broader impacts. So that's why we offered some of those suggestions and advice about how to really ensure adding some of those documented partnerships, ensuring that we're thinking about the social impact and the community, et cetera. Thanks. And I see in the chat too, just more sort of on that same topic, that BI, broader impacts, is also research, right? Absolutely. Did you want to say more, Dr. Lincolns?
No, but I think you hit the nail on the head with that one.
In the current climate, we talk about equity-centered design in this presentation, and also broadening participation. Are there tactics or strategies for addressing broadening participation in the current climate where focus on equity and diversity has been limited or curtailed to some degree in funding priority statements?
Dr. Wonko, do you want to answer that?
I mean, I'll take a stab. So I think, this current climate and administration becomes really challenging, right? Because it doesn't mean that we're answering the questions. The boilerplates may no longer be, applicable. But I think we have to still focus on this equity-centered design. I think how we provide documentation to such and what that looks like while still appealing to the funders and NSF, et cetera, is going to be a tricky business. I mean, just to put it, quite blankly. But that doesn't mean that we deviate from the intent of broader impacts and equity-centered design. We still must do what's right, what's needed, what's necessary, and focused for the population, right, that we intend to serve for the community as well as for the institution. I know at the institutional level, that becomes now a double-edged sword, how to respond in terms of the current climate and how to respond to the climate of your institution as well. I think this is where one of the challenging polls questions came in were getting faculty involved and getting the right faculty and staff and leadership involved so that you're thinking about that from the very beginning and not just waiting either for the response to the proposal or towards the end. It's something that has to be thought about concurrently throughout the entire process. That's my 2 cents anyway. Did we have any questions from the Q&A, Christine?
Not at the moment. I think one thing that I'd like to maybe expand on are institutional strategies for promoting competency with broader impacts for proposal writers. Now, I have been involved in a number of interventions for grant writing coaching groups, and they specifically focused on NIH components, so specific aims and other components of the NIH fellowships, or grants, sorry. But what kind of institutional strategies could be implemented to build capacity for enhancing broader impacts in NSF proposals?
What I will say, when I was at University of Maryland, we had like, I don't want to call them summer intensives, but we had like these summer like workshops, and it would be like, a couple weeks long. And so depending on, what you were applying to. So I would give presentations on the graduate research fellowship from NSF. And that would be to specifically for, grad students, postdocs, whatever. But they would have like different categories. So like NIH, NSF, NIST, whatever you were applying to, they would have these like intensives during the summertime for faculty to like, hop in and like, get assistance and help with. So I guess it really depends on, your institution and what resources and things that they provide. But I can speak to University of Maryland at College Park at least.
And
You
we
know,
have an
I
additional, oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna piggyback off of Dr. Lincoln's. I think looking at workshops, establishing stakeholder engagement plans and opportunities and workshops together makes sense, but also some of this is unfettered territory, especially if we're talking, as you mentioned earlier, in terms of the new climate and what does that mean? What does that look like? And having real open discourse about what that would look like for the future for long-term planning in many areas, certainly in today's topic, in terms of looking at NSF broader impacts and proposal development. But I think over time, that's going to become a question that is essential in many aspects of the work and the grant making that's being done moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Wonkwell. We have a question in the chat, and I think this is a very integral question. My question from Zelalem Mersha. My question relates to how to balance broader impacts, especially when it may occur later in the pipeline, because it's a long-term endeavor, particularly if the STEM proposal focuses on basic research aimed at discovering foundational research hypotheses.
I can't see the question in the chat, but thank you. Let's see if I can scroll down and see it a little more.
It's actually in the Q&A box. I can copy it
Oh,
in.
is it? Okay. Do you mind? Yeah, thank you. Just so I can hit on some of the points that were mentioned, and thank you for the statement from the participant.
If you go to the bottom, you should be able to see the Q&A, Doctor.
Yeah, I thought I would, but I don't. Okay. I have to go click on more. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, thanks so much, Marsha. The balance. Okay. So the balance is your question. Listen, the balance is going to be tricky. It is. Later in the pipeline, I think is a part of what we also presented on a little earlier. For STEM proposals, focusing on basic research is really what is the part and parcel of what we do, right? And trying to marry that with the merits of broader impacts will take a lot of forethought. I think What happens though, in terms of STEM proposals and particularly, we find that we have to sort of start with our basic research and then we're trying to figure out, okay, how to parse that along with some of the broader impact statements, how to bring in the community. But I don't think, at least from where I sit, I don't think that should be a separate endeavor. I think we need to now find the way that we're sort of ensuring that it's integrated, well integrated into the research development process. And that's not been, as you mentioned, the traditional focus. And so I think, again, we're going to have to figure out how this looks moving forward, for not only integrity, but also in terms of how we apply some of these practices in our proposal development. Not an answer, but just my thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'll piggyback off of that. Like, just that balance and by framing your broader impacts. I mean, you could probably frame it in terms of like immediate impacts. So like during the project, you can say something like these occur, well, these will occur while the research is happening, and it's most easiest for reviewers to evaluate that. So example could be like undergraduate or graduate training, mentoring students for underrepresented backgrounds, curriculum modules, data sharing. And then like intermediate impacts would be like post project adoption, like after the research um, findings emerge, but will still have a reasonable horizon. So like partnerships with industries or technology transfer, workforce training programs, and then lastly, that long-term societal impact. Future technologies are enabled by this discovery, policy implications, environmental or health applications. So I think it's like a pathway, not necessarily like a promise to the outcome, but it's like a pathway to it. So I guess if that helps.
I like the use of the term pathway, Dr. Lincoln's, because it shows that these outcomes are occurring along the way. And so we're typically looking at our end result outcomes, right, as a result of the research. But I think figuring out how to document as well as show that these will be sort of rolling outcomes, if you will, throughout the pathway, I think that's a great way of looking at it. Thanks, Chris. I think I see all of us nodding our heads at your comment in the chat. Yeah, much appreciated. It's the way that it really is looked at, and so you have to think like your funders, right? Everyone knows that. So looking at this and not just thinking of it as an afterthought was a real key goal for Dr. Lincoln and I to really hone in on today. That it's a process, it's cyclical. It's not just at the end. It's not an afterthought, a checklist. You'll see that mentioned throughout the presentation, just to your very point that you made, Chris, in the chat. Thank you for that. We're here for your comments, your questions, your insights, your challenges. Feel free to come off mute as well. Okay, there we go. Got a nice long one. I'm going to read it aloud if no one minds. And thinking about the previous question from Misha, Greg comes out of a particle physics background, which is the ultimate of basic research. I think we would all agree, and found that the following quote is inspiring and curious about what we might think as panelists. Our research, forgive me, let me scroll. Our research has to do with, are we good painters, good sculptors, or great poets? I mean, sorry, mine. I have to scroll a little bit. Yeah, mine is cutting off. I can't
It
see the whole
says, I
statement.
mean,
I
all the
mean, and I don't
things,
see.
I got you. It says, I mean, all
Thanks.
the things that we really venerate are in honor of our country and are patriotic about. In the sense, this new knowledge has to sell or has all to do with honor in the country, but it also has nothing to do directly with defending our country except to help make it worth defending. Robert R. Wilson, Congressional Testimony in April 1969.
Greg, I would love for you to come off mute and say more.
Yep.
I think what resonates for me is, it's not about just defending our country, but making it worth defending. The worth part resonated with me. Please go right ahead, Greg.
Sure. So when I think about why we do particle physics, and we used to, and I haven't done this in 20 years, but we always used to put a slide into our presentations. It says, here's all the spin-off technologies that came from what we're doing. And there are lots of them, and they were anybody who's had an MRI has benefited directly from spin-offs of particle physics research. But the real reason that we all got into it, those of us who did, was because it's it's the most beautiful thing that we can create. And that is the benefit of it. It's the fact that we can do things like this is part of what makes our country great. And um and that, it seems to me, is the ultimate broader impact of basic research. And and so I was just curious what you guys thought about that. And by the way, they did get funded after they went to Congress with this, although I have also heard particle physicists say, yeah, but if you tried that in 2000X, it wouldn't work. But it did in 1969.
Thanks for that, Greg. Thanks for explaining and your particular expertise. It resonates with all of us in some degree. I think we all got involved in research, for those of us especially that decided to embark in terminal degrees. So it's because there's a passion, there's a reason, there's an outcome that we want to see happen, both in our society and our individual communities, and therefore in our institutions as well. So again, I think it resonates in a lot of ways. I think the how is where we are, right? And how that looks like and how we do that, how we show credence and give proof to what we're doing in the context of today's discussion for NSF and broader impacts. What does that mean? What does that look like? And how do we, how do we marry that with the basic research and other types of research that we're doing, but also showing that yes, we can also respond to the needs of the communities and the society through the broader impact aspect as well. Thanks for that. I would implore maybe one other question or thought in the chat before we maybe start to close. Christine, if you don't mind. So if there are other curiosities, questions, experiences, especially that might be helpful, and challenges that we didn't get to in the poll, there were some that were something else. If anybody wishes to add to that something else, that'd be really helpful. I was surprised that budgeting wasn't an issue, so I think that's a good thing. I think we sort of have created a way to get over some of the budgeting loops, not funding, but budgeting. But yes, the something else had me intrigued, and I just wonder if anybody wanted to either come off of mute or put it in the chat. Again, the question was, what are the challenges you're experiencing with implementing broader impacts in your institutional work?
Well, I would like to say something about that particular poll question. I'm curious to know from the folks that are here, and the fact that you brought up budgeting is why I'm chiming in here. When you answered the question, were you answering the question in terms of budgeting as it relates specifically to broader impacts, or budgeting period in terms of the proposal process? So that would be interesting to know. If you all would answer that question, come off mute, raise your hand and answer that question if possible. Because that might be why budget wasn't a larger, because they may not be able to see how the budget specifically relates to broader impacts versus the whole budget in and of itself and the proposal process. So anybody have any comments on that line, along those lines, I should say? No. Okay. Interesting.
And Jessica Goodman, you are allowed to come off mute and ask your question or your comment.
So I have not had an NSF proposal that was funded. But whenever I was in the community sector, one of the things that became, I think, very difficult when it came to budgeting is that, like, sometimes regardless of how well you plan out that broader impacts, especially when you're working with another institution. The issue or the concern with budgeting was trying to identify the things that you just didn't see that ended up becoming very necessary to the continuous implementation. Because when it comes to implementation, it's an iterative process. You're always going back and identifying what's working, what's not working, and sometimes the resources, whether it is money, whether it's people or skills or what have you, can often often be, limiting, or you feel like, or you end up kind of running out kind of early in the process. So I guess in a sense, like, what do you do regardless, because again, you're trying to plan as best as you can and maybe even buffering, adding some additional dollars wherever you can so it doesn't look like you're trying to, steal money or anything, or overinflate, but just kind of running out and you haven't, just finished the program altogether. So how do you kind of, I guess, safeguard for that?
I'm going to open it to my fellow colleagues here to respond. And I think it's echoed the challenge that you mentioned, Jessica, by Gunaz in the chat. Limited institutional resources, to do many things, but then also the heavy teaching loads was also another something else. But let's stick to Jessica's question. Any insight, any thoughts, colleagues? Again, it's the how.
Well, I would say, in line with both of those, that when you're looking at your grants, you need to look, and it's really dependent on school, on institution, as to the different types of things that you can do to mitigate this problem. And one of those, so depending on the school, you can write in part of your pay structure to get some release time is what I'm trying to talk about. Now, not all schools like that. Not all schools have enough release time to make that plausible, but that's one thing to look at. If your school allows release time, you can write in part of your pay in the grant, up to a certain percent. I think it's 20%. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but whatever the percentage is that NSF allows. And then in line with what your school allows. So that's one way to look at those adjustments. And thanks, Dr. Gulanez. She said I'm right at the 20%. And then also look at hiring a program coordinator, director, whatever it is, writing that into your grant initially, and they do those operational things that don't require the SME experience. So that cuts down on the amount of time that you have to spend as the PI working on that. And then looking at your students, get a grad student, get an undergrad student that has the capabilities to help to do some of these things. So those are ways to kind of mitigate those institutional resources. Now, Jessica, I don't know if I answered your question or not, or gave you a response to what you were trying to get at. Did I or did I not? And if I didn't, repeat kind of what you were looking for in terms of your question.
Um, I'm not sure if it all the way around did, but I think you brought in some good points in terms of the release time, if you're able to receive the release time, um, as well as, and I think probably the most important one that you offered was the program coordinator, building that in. So not only, I think you have an additional eye, an additional perspective that during that time, especially if you have someone in mind that you can collaborate with that might not be part of, say, the research portion of it. And so that may give you additional insight into additional areas that you may need to look out for or to put into the budget to ensure that you're not running out of funds. And I think too, maybe even thinking about as I'm kind of addressing my own question is, even though we want to get out certain research within a timely manner, taking a step back and really putting in the necessary time to build partnerships at the forefront. So you're able to identify what resources that are available not only in the community, but also within those within your network or your collaborating agencies. And so in the event that, specific NSF funds are not there, what can everyone within these institutions or within the community contribute to ensure the success of the program and the sustainability of the program?
Perfect. That is so true. Partnerships, community involvement. I'm glad you brought those up because I didn't think about those. The other thing that I that you said, something you said just now triggered me that I didn't say, and that is um co-PIing. Have your SMEs, have co-PIs. I think a lot of people get caught up in wanting to only be the only co-PI. And if you have somebody in your department or in your institution or in your network that you can co-PI with, then you all can share that load as well. And so, but the thing that I think Erin would say, and hopefully all of you know who Erin is. She's the QEM president. If what she would say to you is also what she has found is that institutions don't go after the max amount of money. So,
Mm.
you know, they think about, okay, this is what I need to run my program, and I'm only going to stick to that. And then, and I'm not encouraging inflating. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that I think out of fear sometimes, institutions don't ask for what they really need. And so you need to do a really good assessment of what it is you really need, based on past experience, based on folks that you've talked to about what their experiences have been when running these programs, and adjust based on that. So if you look at your RFP and the RFP says um, that you can get up to 2 million, and you've worked it out in your head or in your processing that you're going to ask for 1.2 instead of the 2, then you need to look at that and say, okay, there's still $800,000 out there on the table. If I wanted to do XYZ, or if I seen this problem before, or if somebody told me that they had this issue, maybe I need to revisit asking for a little bit more, because the fear of not getting the money because you're asking for too much is not going to benefit you in the end, because then you may not have enough money to do what you're trying to do. So
I can agree with that. I did submit an NIH. Last year was my second year submitting the same thing. But when some of the responses I got from the first rejection was, this doesn't look like this is going to be enough money. And I thought it'd be, and I guess that kind of goes back to, I'm a penny pincher. I would pinch a penny and spread it. But I think that's also um, incumbent of sometimes what our HBCUs do. We do a lot with very little. And so I think coming out of that mind frame and repositioning and refocusing, which is still a work in progress, so that way we can ask for the things and we don't have to do a lot with a little. We can do a lot with a lot.
exactly, exactly.
Or we can enhance a lot and do a little. You know what I mean? So we don't always have to spread wide in that perspective.
Yeah. And so Christine and I, the Christine that's on the call with us, are
Mhm.
in the middle of writing a proposal right now. And it's a little bit different than a lot of things that we've seen, but we're going to go for it
Mhm.
because this is what we're trying to do is needed. And it's, like I said, nothing that we've seen before. And it may be people like, okay, but we're going to go for it because you ask not, want not. I mean, ask not, get not. So um, anyway, so go for it. Like you said, bust out of that mindset that, you're afraid or they're not going to, if we ask for a little bit, what's the Charles Dickens thing where the little boy goes up and says, more, please, you know,
Yeah. Give
that
me
kind of thing.
more.
That's kind of the mindset we're in right now. It's like, I want this. Should I ask for it? Ask for it. Because worst case, all they can do is tell you no. But if you don't ask for it, you can't get it.
Thank you.
And there's a lot of echoing in the chat as well. I'm also a former federal project officer, Katina, that mentions that yes, she concurs that people vastly underestimate what they need, and just ask for the max that you could possibly justify, not a minimal budget. And then I see some other echoing as well from Jalilum as well. So
And thanks, Chris, for the good luck.
I think we'll
You're on
hand
mute.
back over to you. Thank you, Christine.
I was just posting an evaluation link in the chat so you can complement the wonderful conversation we've had today. And we've run the gamut from designing broader impacts for sustainability to budgeting around those broader impacts. So I'm really, really pleased with this conversation today, and I want to congratulate and thank our presenters and everybody else who contributed to our conversation today. I will grant you 5 minutes to get to your next meeting, event, or quiet time in your office. Thank you so much for attending today, and we appreciate it. And please check out QEM's event page for upcoming webinars. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.